This is Metal Hellsinger VR, a rhythm-based FPS that was forged by the heavy metal music gods and wears its Doom influences tattooed on its arms as sleeves. Here, your ability to shoot on the beat will enhance your gameplay experience. The more in sync you are with the rhythm, the more intense the music will become, and the more death and destruction you will unleash on your enemies. For metalheads like myself, screw Beat Saber, this is our music rhythm VR game. Stick around and I'll tell you why. Hey guys, it's Chris from the VR Grid and welcome to the channel. If you like this video, give it a like for us, and if you're interested in more VR content from us, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you don't miss new videos as they drop. And if you're looking to join our VR conversations, feel free to leave a comment, or even better, join us each and every Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific here for the Virtual Boys podcast. So I want to kick this review off talking about the sound side of things, because I strongly feel that your interest in this game will be heavily based on how you feel about the music in it. This is a rhythm-based music shooter where shooting on the beat is the foundation of the game, so liking the music here is about as paramount to the experience as it was in Beat Saber. Thankfully, there's more here to do than simply chop blocks, but we will get to that shortly. The game's original soundtrack was composed by game music veterans Two Feathers, and it tends to favor the melodic death metal genre, with each song featuring some of the largest names in the metal world. Each featured song seems to be written in the flavor favoring the bands that these singers come from, so if you like and are familiar with bands like Dark Tranquillity, Trivium, Arch Enemy, Soilwork, Ginger, Lamb of God, and System of a Down, then you likely will know the singers and will probably really enjoy the music here. The base game comes with 8 original songs, 1 for each level, with 2 more songs joining these for the game's boss fights, bringing the total to a slightly anemic 10 songs total. The 2 DLC original song packs sold separately add another 5 great songs to the list, and I think they're priced alright. These are highly recommended if you are enjoying the core game, as honestly, it does need more music and really should have come standard with these songs included. Additionally, there's another DLC pack you can pick up called the Essential Hits, and skews towards the more pop and mainstream rock side of things. And with the exception of Down with the Sickness by Disturbed, it didn't interest me at all. Personally, I found myself just replaying the original music levels to hear the new music, as some of these tracks, including the original DLC tracks, are phenomenal. Doom only wishes that it had music like this to kill to. Now, while this may not be everyone's cup of tea musically, I am happy to report to my metalhead friends that this game earns the right to put metal in its title. Yes, there's a lot of screaming vocals here with plenty of double bass and shredding guitar solos. This isn't radio-friendly metal-like crap, though that being said, I will say, for those of you who are not yet ready to worship at the metal music altar, the game still manages to be pretty accessible to non-metal fans, easing them in with songs that are built on some basic head-bobbing beats and chunky riffs, while layering on some of the more extreme parts only as the player gets better. The long and the short of it is that the songs here never stray too far away from their toe-tapping roots, and that's really a good thing for a game based on shooting to the rhythm. Weapon and explosion sounds here all come off appropriately punchy, and well, they sound very much like something you would expect from the modern Doom games. Fortunately, weapon and combat sounds all complement the on-screen action as well here, with well-timed shots, explosions, or slashes, usually just adding to the already groovy percussion sections of the songs. Finally, I just want to mention that there is a narrative to the game that lightly ties together your trip through hell, as industry veterans Troy Baker and Jennifer Hale handle the voice duties here, and as usual, they don't disappoint. Jumping into the gameplay side of things, and yes, Metal Hellsinger plays a lot like Doom and Doom Eternal, and it's very obvious that the developers here were trying to tie together the combat flow that you could get during the Doom's more arena type areas with the rhythm flow that music games thrive on. Given that Doom is known for its industrial metal soundtrack, and this pairing does make a lot of sense on paper. In practice, it mostly works, but Hellsinger is never as good of a shooter as the Doom games, not even close. And a lot of that for me has to do with how tied the shooting is to the game requiring you to shoot in rhythm to the music. On-screen prompts help, but as a shooter I often felt like I was playing with one hand behind my back. Shooting in rhythm raises your multiplier, which in turn also boosts your power meter, which, once filled, allows you to unleash a special that is unique to each of the game's weapons. Everything you do in Hellsinger affects your XP multiplier. Shooting, reloading, dashing, jumping, and even the very Doom-like melee attack that you can pull off when enemies are stunned all contribute to your multiplier and all detract from you if you fail to nail the timing. This not only limits the instruments and vocals in the song, but it also makes you less lethal. When you're sucking, this can really kill the fun factor, but when you do manage to get into that sweet flow and find a weapon combination that works for you, the combination of decimating your enemies and the swell of the song around you can be a pretty potent gaming experience, which is sometimes evidenced by the gameplay footage you might be watching as I started headbanging. Speaking of weapons, what's here is good, with each weapon serving a slightly different combat style. Unfortunately, there just aren't many of them, with the core game only having 6 weapons and 2 more being locked behind a paywall, with both bow and arrow and machine gun each being tied to the 2 separate DLC offerings. Making matters worse, you can only take 4 weapons with you, with 2 of those slots permanently occupied by the essential weapons of the blade and the skull, which is essentially this game's equivalent of a pistol. Again, similar to Doom, this game's version of the super shotgun is a must-use most of the time, which really only means you get 1 other weapon to choose from during any given round. This isn't a deal breaker, but I always wished I had a bit more variety on hand at any given time. Metal Hellsinger is a very pick-up and play style of game, with levels only lasting about 10 to 15 minutes in length, including the final boss level. Level design is quite linear here, with most levels consisting of arena-type areas that are linked together with connective hallways. An arena is cleared, and it's on to the next. This simple design doubles down on Doom's arena areas, and it works here, even if it does make for an extremely arcade shooter experience. Adding to this sense of arcadiness is the fairly basic enemy AI. Enemies here essentially just spawn and attack, often waiting for you to engage with them. Outside of this, if you have played a modern Doom game, you know the mechanics here, as everything from the game's double jump and dash move to killing dazed enemies for health is spot on Doom. Oftentimes though, the flow of combat and the enemy variety just isn't here though, and as such the shooting here on its own does feel a little paint by numbers. Thankfully though, that's where the rhythm shooter side of the game comes in, giving the game a much needed depth to its gameplay. And that, guys, is my key takeaway here for those of you who might be on the fence here, because this isn't a great shooter on its own and very much only works once you realize it's a rhythm game first and a shooter second. As a VR port of the game, I definitely think this is the best way to play the game, as it just feels so much more alive as a shooter. Unfortunately, the game in its current state often works against players wanting to really let loose, as the main walking speed is too slow, making the dash feel often too necessary. The game also only has 1 speed for its smooth turning, and it's painfully slow, meaning you really need to stand and turn in place or use a swivel chair. Additionally, changing and reloading weapons is slow and tedious, and often wrecked a chain multiplier by simply failing to switch weapons fast enough or failing to pick up on my flick of the wrist to reload. Again, this isn't a deal breaker, but the game does feel like it wasn't play tested for seasoned VR gamers who are gonna want to play this flat out. This is further evidenced by the game's starting settings that see click turning and blinders on by default. Come on guys, that is not very metal of them. The game's 8 stages can be beaten pretty quickly, but for those looking for more, levels can be replayed on higher difficulties, as well as the unlockable torment challenges. Of course, there is the paid DLC, which adds 2 new guns and 5 new songs, but this doesn't add any additional levels. And unfortunately, the Flat Games edition of the roguelite Leviathan mode is totally absent here, which honestly does make this package feel a little light at launch. Graphics wise, Metal Hellsinger is a pretty great experience, or a pretty meh, depending on what platform you're playing on. The gameplay I captured is from the PC version, which also fairly closely resembles the PSVR 2 version. Both of these versions of Hellsinger retain much of the graphical flair of the flat game, which, yes, looks a lot like modern Doom games. Unfortunately, the Quest version suffers from some pretty bland visuals, lacking most of the game's lighting effects, which actually affects the gameplay here, as some of the enemies' attacks were actually hard to see coming without those additional effects. However, most importantly, guys, is that the Quest version really suffers on the performance side of things, with a lower frame rate than those other versions, which when combined with some frequent frame drops, a game based around rhythm and accuracy, becomes a nightmare to play at times. Going back to the PC and PSVR 2 versions, the only real graphical issue I have is the game's overly soft, almost blurry appearance at times. I'm not sure if this is due to the lower resolution textures that no doubt came from the need for this to run on the Quest, but it could also be the rather aggressive use of anti-aliasing. This gives the PC version an edge here though, as it can be mitigated slightly by bumping up the super sampling, but without any graphical setting options on either PC or PSVR 2, it still stands as a sore point to an otherwise impressive looking game. Like I said, when playing the game, this isn't actually a massive issue, and on the PSVR 2 version, I'm just happy to see the game run at a native 90 FPS and avoid super sampling altogether. Outside of the resolution issues though, both PC and PSVR 2 versions do look like high-end VR games. Draw distance and enemy count is on point, and like I said, most of the graphical effects from the flat version seems to have made it over here into VR. This isn't just a VR reimagining of Metal Hellsinger or some crap Metal Hellsinger experience nerfed to run in VR. This is visually the full meal deal. Just stay away from the Quest version. And finally, that brings me to my final thoughts and review score. I know people who don't like heavy metal music who do like Metal Hellsinger, but if you're a fan of heavy music, it sure does help here. If you also love classic FPS shooters or modern Doom games, well, then this game was made for you. I am that person, and I am all in on Metal Hellsinger. That being said, I do wish at times it was a deeper shooter than it is, and the lack of gory enemy splatter, come on, that's a real missed opportunity. On a more fundamental critique of the game, it is light on content, especially without the paid DLC. Additionally, it needs more in the way of user settings, both in terms of gameplay settings and graphical, as this could solve many of the core issues that I have with the game. At the end of the day though, guys, the PSVR 2 and PC versions of Metal Hellsinger VR are solid, and the game is a fun rhythm-based Doom-esque shooter. Just know going in, this isn't a deep shooter experience, with the focus here definitely on the music rhythm side of things. If that doesn't appeal to you, or you hate heavy music, then this may still surprise you, but it may be better left for a sale. The VR Grid gives Metal Hellsinger a 7.5 out of 10.